Okay. It is 9:50. I would love to let everyone chat, but we have a shortened half-hour session. And you can do the math. We have 7 prophetesses to go through. I will say up front, this is a very extensive source sheet, meaning I put a lot of extra materials in. So if we don't get to all 7, which we may not, please bring it home, and you should be able to glean at least the gist of it by yourself. And I will also, because of the time, normally I would wait for my larger questions until the end, but I will say them now so that you can have them in your mind. So we will go through why the rabbis chose these specific 7 women to be prophetesses. And I say chose because, as you will see, it is very much not always obvious why they are prophetesses. But that's what we are going to explore, why the rabbis thought that they were prophetesses based on the texts. But why these and not others? There are many modern sources that might add others. I'm personally a fan of Sarah Bat Asher, but she didn't make the cut. So why these? And more broadly, once we've gone through this deep dive of why these 7 people are prophets, what might we learn about how the rabbis think about what being a prophet means in general, because of course there are also all the male prophets. I didn't have time to look at all the male prophets and what their texts are, so I could compare male versus female, but I think if there's time, we can talk a little bit about what the rabbis think about being prophets in general. But for now, let's dive in. Oh, and the other thing is I will have to be more lecture-y than I would if I had a little more time, so I apologize. We're not going to do a lot of people reading sources. Almost all of the sources for this topic are found in Megillah 14, and you will see little pieces of it throughout this source sheet. And it starts off pretty directly. The sages taught, 48 prophets and 7 prophetesses prophesied on behalf of the Jewish people, and they neither subtracted nor added on to what is written in the Torah, blah, blah, blah. The second half of this could be its own very interesting discussion, but we won't go into that. And then right afterwards, who are the 7 prophetesses? And they are listed: Sarah, Miriam, Deborah, Hannah, Abigail, Huldah, and Esther. So those are they, and we will dive right in, and you will see that there are very different models for why different women are considered to be prophetesses. And Sarah is a model. I haven't given names to these models, but the not very obvious model, let's call it. So Megillah says, Sarah is a prophetess, as it is written. And it quotes Haran, the father of Milcah, and the father of Iscah. And Rabbi Yitzchak said, Iscah is Sarah. Okay, so there's a leap right there. Why are they doing that? A typical rabbinic thing. We never heard of Iscah, but we know that Haran is the father of Milcah and the father of Sarah, so it must be Sarah. So that's leap number 1, right? And then, but why is she being called Iscah here? Because, and this is another rabbinic thing, and we will see it in other places throughout this source sheet, they're going to take something that is not necessarily the root, but that sort of sounds like the thing. And then we see this also, like, in the Haggadah, we see it in many places, in many sources. So it means sahta. She saw by means of divine inspiration. As it is stated in all that Sarah has said to you, hearken to her voice, Genesis 21:12. And I have stuck in there for you Genesis 21:12. What are they talking about? And it is the very controversial situation where she is sending Hagar away and Ishmael, and Abraham is not happy about that, and God is saying, you should listen to Sarah. So so the proof text is that her name is Iscah, which means divinely inspired, and the example of the prophecy is her foresight of some sort, and again, this, I will say, seems tenuous, at least to my eyes, that she has foreseen that Ishmael and Hagar need to be sent away and that it will go to Yitzchak. So if we had more time, we would discuss this, but none of this is direct. And this is very much a rabbinic choice, I would say, to make Sarah a prophet for whatever rabbinic reason there is, which hopefully we can discuss at the end. Move on to Miriam, and it couldn't be more different. First of all, we know that Miriam is a prophet because we are told so. right? Miriam, the prophetess, the sister of Aaron, took a timbrel in her hand, right? That's after they crossed the sea and they are singing and dancing. And it calls her all the way at the end there, a prophetess. Okay, so we know that she's a prophetess, but why is she a prophetess? And this is a question that some people may have had when reading this. Why does it say Miriam, the prophetess, the sister of Aaron? Why doesn't it say the sister of Moshe, or the sister of Moshe and Aaron? And the Gemara is saying here in this source, it's because when she gave her big prophecy that qualified her to be a prophet, it was before Moshe, when she was only the sister of Aaron. So they're taking this little clue, and then they have to say, okay, but what was the prophecy? And there are all of these really great sources that we're not going to have a chance to go into, but both in Megillah, and then I also stuck one in from Sotah, that talks all about these midrashim, about Miriam, and both her prophecy, and then the Sotah one is really about her sort of logic that she's able to use at a young age. And so her prophecy is that Moshe would be born and that he would redeem the people. And Sotah, Amram had divorced, the Midrash goes, Yocheved, and therefore Moshe was not to be. And Miriam, one, prophesied that you have to get together and have another child because it will be the Redeemer, but then also used logic, right? You are making sure that if everyone gets divorced, you will make sure that there will be neither boys nor girls, whereas Pharaoh is only making sure that there will be no boys. So a sort of logic aspect of her prophecy as well. And then just to finish up her little prophecy story, it says that then when Moshe had to be put in the river, her father, who had been so proud of her prophecy, he rapped her on the head and said, "Where is your prophecy now?" Meaning Moshe is going to die and is not going to redeem the people. And when it says that she stood in the reeds to see what would become of Moshe, she was really waiting to see whether her prophecy would come true. So this is the Miriam story, and it's interesting that even though Miriam is mentioned many times, but it's only all the way at the end that she's actually called a Neviah. And yet it's about a prophecy that the rabbis choose, the prophecy is something that they put into her early childhood. That's her story. We move on to Devorah, and again, she is explicitly called a prophetess. And then I stuck in Judges 4:9, this is my guess. It seems pretty obvious what her prophecy is. I will accompany you, however, you will not be glorified by the course you follow, because it is into a woman's hand that God will deliver Sisera. Right? So it says that she's a prophet, and then she basically, if you read the story, there's only one sentence kind of in there, but it's pretty explicit that she is seeing that a woman will kill Sisera. Pretty straightforward. Okay. Now we get to Hannah, who is more of the Sarah model. Hannah, as it was written, Hannah prayed and said, "My heart rejoices in the Lord, my horn is exalted in the Lord." My horn is exalted suggests that she could foresee David and Solomon's kingship, and if she had said, "My pitcher is exalted," then it would have meant that Saul's line would have had the kingship. So that's kind of a stretch. And it's even more of a stretch if we look at the Hebrew that they are quoting, which I put here. If you read the English, the direct translation of this quote is, Hannah prayed, "My heart exults in the Lord. I have triumphed through the Lord. I gloat over my enemies. I rejoice in your deliverance." Not a lot of prophecy at face value. But I have actually bolded the word in Hebrew that this quote from Megillah is talking about. So it says, "Titpalal Hannah v'tomar alatz libi baronai Ramah Karni." So that is what Ramah Karni is, what is being translated as "I have triumphed," but it's not obvious. So the word Karen is what the source above in Megillah is translating as "my horn is exalted in the Lord." A Karen is a horn or a ray of light, like Moshe having horns on his head. So this is the source's taking something from Shmuel, thinking that the word that is being used is strange. Why is the word keren being used, horn? And then taking it to say, well, this must be referring to the Davidic line, and therefore she must be a prophet. So similar to Miriam, where there's neither a place that says that she is a prophet, nor is there a really obvious prophecy. And I would say this is even less obvious than Sarah saying, oh, well, we need to get rid of Hagar and Ishmael and go with Yitzhak. Abigail is going to be our most complicated one, so I'm going to spend a little time on it. But you will see that the kinds of models that we already went through are going to help us get through this one. So Abigail, by the way, is, I think, the third wife of David, and considered to be sort of the most intelligent and mature as well, and also very beautiful. And she was, when she met David, she was married to somebody named Nabal, who did not treat David well, and David was trying to kill him, basically. And Abigail is trying to stop this. So, the quote from Samuel says, she was riding on the ass and going down a trail on the hill when David and his men appeared, coming toward her, and she met them. She's trying to stop them from the murder. But above, the sources translate this as, she rode on the donkey and she came down by the covert of the mountain. What is covert? Like covert meaning like secret. Because in fact, the word that I've bolded here in Hebrew is seter, which in fact does mean secret, hidden, this kind of idea. So again, the rabbis are taking this concept of, here's this strange word, beseter, it doesn't fit, it means hiddenness. There's something about Abigail and this encounter and hiddenness. And what is it going to be? Okay. So, she has her period, and she takes a cloth, and she asks him to look at the cloth. This is a thing that is still done in modern times in certain communities. Do I still have my period or not? Okay. I don't know why he's a halachic expert, but apparently he is. Okay. So she is going to show him this cloth, and he rightly says, being the halachic expert that he is, I cannot tell you right now because it is nighttime. It is nighttime, and we cannot look at these cloths at nighttime because we can't see well, and therefore I cannot tell you. Okay, that was the right answer. So, but she is using all of this and assuming that he will be a halachic expert to hint at another thing that cannot happen at night, which is capital cases. Why, I don't know. But you cannot try, apparently, according to this source, a capital case at night, meaning you cannot decide that someone should be killed at night, right? So they actually have a longer back and forth than what is here. So he says, oh, but I this, and she said, no, but eventually she convinces him, no, he would have to go to court, he would have to have a full trial. If you kill him, you will have blood on your hands, and this convinces him not to murder Nabal. Okay. Then we have, on the next page, we have the quote that the Megillah is going to refer to. So we have the Megillah saying, I don't know which order to do this in. Okay, I'll do it in the order that it says. Okay, so she says, do not let this be a cause of stumbling. So I've done this, which is zot. So there's a thing that you should not stumble on, but it's not the one we just talked about. And it says, then David says, thank you for restraining me and from seeking redress in blood by my own hands. Okay, thank you for stopping me from this murder. But when he says from taking blood, he says damim. This is in the Hebrew on the other side here, which I bolded. So there's dam is blood, damim is bloods. I mean, it's not a thing, but it's bloods, right? So why does it say bloods? So there must be two things going on here. So we already know that one is that she has been talking about the blood of her period. And in this second Megillah here, it shows that by telling him that she had her period, she also essentially stopped him from being intimate with her, which would have been inappropriate. So that's blood number 1. And blood number 2 is the murder of Nabal. Meanwhile, we have not gotten to any prophecy yet, right? This is all very interesting, but there's no prophecy, and she's supposed to be a prophet. So we finally get to what is her prophecy. We know there has to be one because at the beginning they said the Satyrs. There's some secret thing about her, okay? And it is the this that is in the top of the page. Do not let this be a cause of stumbling, okay? And what does the Megillah say? By the word this, we can understand that there is someone else who will be a stumbling block for David. And what is this referring to? The incident of Bathsheba. So if we all recall, later on, there was Bathsheba. David sinned with multiple sins. Sinned with her, sinned against the husband, bad time all around. And so the rabbis are saying that this word this, which seems completely innocuous, is in fact her prophecy or a hint that she at least personally knows, even if she maybe is not telling David, that there will be the incident of Bathsheba. So that is why she is a prophet and what her prophecy is. Okay, I still have time. I'm doing good. Okay, we have 2 more. Huldah, we have some interesting comments about Huldah being a female prophet here in Megillah. Why is she allowed to prophesy in Jeremiah's presence? Because she's a woman and he's a man. And why would someone choose to get a prophecy from her instead of from Jeremiah? The answer being a woman might give a better prophecy. But she is a prophetess. So we don't have to guess. She is a prophetess, and it's also 100% clear. Many of us are not familiar, including myself, of the story of Huldah. This is the whole story. You can read it. I gave it to you. So she's a prophetess. Here's her prophecy. It is the most direct one in the entire 7, even though none of us has ever heard of her. Well, we've heard of her, but you know what I mean. Okay, and lastly, Esther, and then we'll have time for a larger discussion. Esther, it came to pass on the 3rd day that Esther clothed herself in royalty. The 3rd day, this is the 3rd day of the fasting that Esther asked of all of the people and of herself. And after the 3rd day, she's going to go before the king and find out whether he's going to kill her or whether he is going to come to her party, right? So this is the 3rd day. She clothed herself in royalty. Okay, so on the English on the left, it says, put on royal apparel, right? That makes sense. She's going to put on her best royal queen clothes, and he's going to be awed by her. But in fact, in the Hebrew, it says malchut, which, as described in Megillah, is royalty, kingness or queenness, right? So she clothed herself in royalty, in regalness, and this is understood to in fact be clothing herself with God's regalness. So she is wrapped or maybe exuding some kind of divine inspiration, spark, something. When she goes, perhaps it inspires her to say the right words to Ahasuerus. Exactly what this prophecy is not spelled out, and I couldn't find it. Perhaps that's appropriate for the Megillah where everything is hidden. But what is clear is the reason she is considered to be a prophet is that this word malchut it means that she is somehow has some element of the divine in her, around her, through her when she approaches Ahasuerus to make this very critical ask. Okay, so those super fast, and I really encourage you to go back and look again when it's not so fast, are the 7 prophetesses. And from the rabbi's point of view, why are they prophetesses based on the text, and what are their prophecies? Okay, So now, I get to hear from all of you, right? So now we get back to the original questions that I posed. What do you think about, right, so now we see that it's very much a choice. I mean, I almost feel like we could pick almost any person, and using these techniques that we just touched upon, you could probably make almost anyone into a prophet, right? Maybe. I mean, I feel like you could. Like, I'm certainly like, Rivka comes to mind. I bet you could do something pretty easily with Rivka. You know, she knows that there, you know, she's speaking to God already. Why isn't she a prophet, right? So what do people think about why any, especially the more tenuous ones, through who, right, maybe were chosen to be prophets? Or does anyone have any ideas? And then we'll go to the next question. Sure.
Well, I would think that there was already a tradition of them being prophets. And then, so like Sarah was already considered to be a prophet. And then the rabbis are trying to pin down exactly where this tradition came from, so they have to find a proof text somewhere. And that's where they come up with these very tenuous proof texts.
Okay, right, and we know there's a pretty big leap often between the Mishnah and the Gemara, the original Hebrew Mishnah, and then the rest of the Talmud, where there is a lot of oral tradition going on, and sometimes it really is about, well, we don't really have a proof text for this, but we're going to sort of find it because we know that this is the way things are supposed to be, or we know that we believe this, or whatever. Okay, so that's one idea. There were already traditions of these women.
Well, I have more of a question than a comment. You know, I'm always leery of being misled by the English where we say prophet, we mean someone who predicts the future. And my question is really, is that in fact the meaning in the Torah and in the Nevi'im? Is that what Navi and Nevi'ah truly means? Because in the stories of the prophets, that aspect of them is so minor, and they also do miracles constantly. Particularly like Elijah, do miracles. And do we mean what Christians might interpret as a saint when we say Navi, or do we really focus on you're not a Navi unless you make an accurate prediction of the future? It's a question.
Right, it's a good question. That was question number 2. What is that? What do we learn about? What do the rabbis think a prophet is? I have to say, having gone through how they go like this to find, an actual prophecy, with the exception of Esther, right? Like, at least, and again, I didn't look at the 48 men, right? I'm a little inclined to think that maybe it's necessary, but not sufficient. Maybe there can be more, but there has to be a little. But yeah, it's a really good question. Anyone else on either why these 7 or what do we learn about prophetness from these sources?
Aside from the Arba'im Mahot 3, which are not listed here, are there other women in the Tanakh that offhand that potentially could have been listed here?
Well, I told you I'm a fan of Sarah myself. I really looked for something that could make Sarah a prophet, but she didn't actually prophesy yet. So, I don't know.
Rebecca? It's definitely a lack of what.
Well, he said the Imahot, right? So, yeah, go ahead.
One thing I like about this collection of 7 is they do span the entire history. Mm-hmm. Right? Sarah is like pretty much the beginning of the Jewish story, and Esther is, I guess Daniel was like the last, events that are in the Tanakh or whatever, but like pretty close to the end. And you have all these like different eras. You've got Sarah at the beginning, then you have Miriam in the Exodus, then you have Deborah and the era of the judges. Like you have like a representative of every era. Mm-hmm. So by coming up with this 7, it's also a way of saying like there were always prophetesses. There was no time when it was only men. There was no era where it was.
Right. I mean, this comes back to why I want to do this topic in the first place, right? I think it's really fascinating the rabbis had any. I mean, some of them are in the Tanakh, you have to have them, but yeah, that's right. Yeah.
I mean, one thing we don't see is, God coming to a woman and saying, I am choosing you to be a prophet, the way Jeremiah is chosen, or Moses is chosen, or Isaiah is chosen. We don't see any, you don't have any scenes of, what did you say? Scenes of direct interaction of God with the women, and with these women, or we don't see them being kind of elevated, anointed, elevated formally to have like a formal office. I
Right.
mean, Deborah, I know that Deborah, at least not in this account, not
Right.
in these accounts, they don't describe that.
Right. Yeah.
I recall hearing that Sarah exceeded out as a prophet. Is that something you can expand on and explicate?
No. I hope there's a source out there like that. I didn't find it, but that would be great. And I'd love to know why they said that, right? Because it's hard to even.
Something you haven't even heard?
Okay, I'm not a rabbi, right? I did my research here. I really wanted to know. Thank you for thinking that I'm so knowledgeable. For next year, maybe. Yes, no, but it's a really good, if that's true, that's really fascinating and a good question and, worth looking into. Yeah, anyone else? Yeah.
You can take a somewhat more cynical view, and that is that, there was a tradition of these women being prophetesses. Some of the proof texts had been lost over time, and so the rabbis had to then go back and retrofit a story to fill in for the material that had been lost, and they had to come up with a justification. If the tradition had been there from an earlier period. Perhaps,
Right, so that's
some of the
interesting.
pre-commissioner with modern period texts got lost in getting from Palestine to Babylon. or
Right.
whatever.
Yes, that's similar to what Gavin said, but you're saying maybe there were better sources and then we had to yeah,
Because, the rabbis
fiddle
had to go
around with it.
back
Yeah,
and-
yeah.
This is all they could find at that time.
Right, yeah, could be. The history of our texts is very fascinating. Rafael?
Going back to the question of how do you define a Navi or Neviah, the rabbis certainly seem to say that it's that future type thing, but I'm not sure, like before, I think they might even be, there may have been an evolution of what Navi means. I mean, we know language tends to evolve over time. Cool did not used to mean a good thing, I don't know, like 200 years ago. It meant not warm. And I feel like definitely, because we know for sure that at least I think 3 of the people on here are definitely called Nebiah, Miriam, and whatnot. And I feel like maybe the rabbis could have been trying to adapt what they understood Nebiah to mean to their understanding of the word, even if prior understandings of the word were different.
Right, so likely there were different understandings of what, right? I mean, we have this all in one portion of the Talmud, but we also know that even one portion of the Talmud, in fact, develops over time, right? So that could happen. Yeah.
Well, I guess considering that it's Shavuot now, I'm wondering if one could derive from Ruth some proof text that Ruth was a prophet, or Naomi.
Or Naomi, right, yeah, maybe, yeah, right.
The other books you have women other than Esther and Ruth?
I'm sorry.
I don't know. Are there books named after women other than Ruth and Esther?
Well, yeah, exactly. Esther.
Other than Ruth and Esther, yeah. I don't know. All right. Well, we're unfortunately out of time, so I'm glad we were able to have the discussion at the end after all, and yeah, bring them home with your